The people you love weren't algebra, to be calculated, subtracted, or held at arm's length across a decimal point. Welcome to AMI Audiobook Review, the weekly podcast where we talk all things audiobooks, and we are well into September now. We've been talking many audiobook things with myself, Ramya Amadin. I'm your host, with co-host Jacob Szymanski.
Hey, Rams.
Hello. Technical producer Nasreen Abdel Majid. And I didn't pick today's quote. You did, Jacob. So, where's it from?
This one is from The Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly something. Forget her name.
Holly Jackson?
Holly Jackson, thank you.
Did you just spin the wheel and pick this book?
I don't reveal my secrets on how I do this, okay? But no, I like this quote because it took me back to a debate I had with a roommate 5 years ago that really stuck in my mind. This debate lasted 2 weeks, okay? Basically, I was kind of mad at him because he kept psychoanalyzing people. And I think what I get from this quote is telling people to don't analyze people like that.
Are you serious?
That's the way I interpret
this
quote.
If I had known this context beforehand, I would have vetoed this quote.
Why? Is it because you psychoanalyze people all the time?
Absolutely, all the time. You should see my TikTok feed.
Oh my God. Okay, listen. I think that psychoanalyzing people is kind of rude.
I mean, I do it with the intention of empathy, okay? So maybe it's not necessarily psychoanalyzing, but it's that there are reasons behind the things that may trigger us or trigger them or put us in places where we may not be as empathetic. So the way that I get to the empathy side of it is to say, these may be the reasons why. Is that fair? Could it be fair? Did this come up in your debate with your roommate?
Right. It's coming from a good place. I understand that. I think that maybe it's not always your place to analyze someone like that. And maybe somebody doesn't want to be analyzed like that. It doesn't even matter if you're right or not. It's just I just want you to be here for me. You don't need to tell me why I'm eating 2 tubs of ice cream a day.
Okay.
You don't need
no
to
judgment, please. Yeah.
Yes.
Non-judgmental psychoanalogy is fine. Analysis is fine. No, that's very fair. And especially nowadays, the way we kind of just ether diagnose people and throw around words that are really medical or psychiatrical.
Yeah, yeah. Just saying a blanket statement oh yeah, that dude, yeah, he's a narcissist.
Exactly.
Or, that guy's a psychopath.
Oh yeah, no, we can't
because it's never that simple, right?
Yeah, no, of course. All right, fine. All right, good context for this quote and the book. Let's look at the CELA homepage before we go any further. We still have an hour-ish of discussion, so before we forget, this is from the Center for Equitable Library Access, which you can visit at celalibrary.ca. Glance at the homepage. 3 featured titles that are still up there are The Whispers by Ashley Audrain. It's suspense and thrillers. If you still haven't read it, go back, check our review from early September episodes, and then read the book because it's so good. The Wager by David Graham, historical title. And the last one is The Misses by E.L. James, and that's a romance, which brings me back to some of the taboo chats we had last time. On today's episode, we actually have 2 guests joining us, 2 avid readers. They're going to give us some of their book reading habits, some recommendations, reading adventures, and we will get to the first one now.
First coming up is Karen Magee, a content development specialist at AMI, longtime colleague of Ramya and I's. Karen, how's it going?
Hello, Karen.
It's going very well. Thank you, guys. I love nothing more than talking about books.
Psychoanalysis, did you have anything pressing you wanted to add to that convo?
I'm still a little shook that apparently it's not good to eat 2 tubs of ice cream in a day. I got stuck on that.
But no one's judging you.
Yeah, we don't need to unpack
not you
that
guys.
at all.
No, we don't need to unpack.
I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine.
Wait. What are the flavors? No, I'm kidding.
No, chocolate chip cookie dough. Always has to be chocolate chip cookie dough. And I'm gotten into cherry. The cherry with the real cherries
I'm
in
judging
it.
a little.
That's okay.
I like to start us off with a new segment we want to try. I'm calling this one Rapid Fire Reviews. I was pretty happy that I came up with this one, okay?
Yep.
Here are the rules, Karen. You're our first participant. You get 10 seconds to review 5 books, 10 seconds each. We give you the name of the book and the author, and you give us a really quick review, 10 seconds, and then a bell goes off, and we move on to the next book. Do that 5 times. After we finish that, you get to pick one of the books in that list of 5, which you provided to us before the show, and you get to elaborate on that title and give us your proper review.
Sounds good.
Sounds
Can't
good?
wait.
Are you
Yep.
nervous? You don't sound
Well,
nervous at all. I
I'm
feel like you
nervous
should be a
about
bit.
10 seconds because
Oh.
10 seconds is not a long time.
It's not.
And I
Mm-mm.
tend to talk fast.
Yeah, well, that's your advantage, though.
Yeah, but then
You
can
got a
people
lot.
understand me? It's kind of important too.
We'll break that down later.
All
Slow
right.
it down.
All right. First title is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover.
Did not enjoy this one. I was surprised because I'd heard a lot of great things. I don't know what I didn't like about it, but I probably won't read the second book in the series, which is odd for me because I like to read an entire series. I'm a completist.
Oh, okay. What We Find by Robin Carr, Sullivan's Crossing series.
Love the series from CTV. Anything starring Scott Sullivan, I will watch, but I like to read the book first. Loved it. Robin Carr also did the Virgin River series. Very light romance. Dang it.
That's all the time you get.
Ah!
All right, next one. The School for Good and Evil by Somin Shamaini.
So highly recommend, aimed at kids about 13 years age, I would say. Recommended by my 10-year-old neighbor, so I'd have something to talk with her about. She's a very voracious reader, and she came to visit me this summer a lot.
I love that. Got
This
real
is great.
anecdotal. Okay.
Love that. Try. So much to say, so little time.
And you had to move on. This is live radio vibes. Okay. Big Bad by Lily Anderson.
Okay, this is from the Buffy the Vampire Slayer universe. You know how I feel about that. So a 10 out of 10, highly recommend. There's a second book in the series I haven't read yet. If you love Buffy, this is a great book to read.
Nice.
That was a full review right
Yeah,
there.
yeah, that was
Wow.
good.
Oh, I'm
That was
You had, to,
fantastic.
you have to know her to know why she recommended it. That was a nice one. Okay.
All right. Last one. The Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson.
Loved this book so much. Gave me some vibes like Serial the podcast, good murder mystery solving by a young person. Excellent, excellent book. It's a 7-part series.
And you said excellent twice. You sure you didn't want to economize those words?
No, it was
that excellent.
Rookie mistake.
It was no. I would not waste a word like that. This was an important word to put in.
Okay, twice.
Yeah.
Excellent squared. That's less syllables for next time.
I need you to edit for me. There we go.
Not a
No
chance.
way. No way. Okay. I feel like we could get into all 5 of these books just because the 10-second reviews were so good. Okay, where do you want to start? Should
Let's do The Good Girl's Guide to Murder.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one I read most recently. I love a good murder book. Started reading Nancy Drew books when I was a kid, so a mystery book. A lot of my list were young adult books I found. I've been drawn to those recently because the young adult literature is so good right now. This
It's so
follows-
everywhere right now, Karen. Like, what isn't
Oh.
young adult literature anymore?
Well, I'm looking at this, and The School for Good and Evil is a series on Netflix. The Good Girl's Guide to Murder is also a series. Is also coming out as a series, I believe, with Netflix. It might be Hulu, so don't quote me on that one. I loved it. It followed a young woman named Pippa, who I love that name, and it's all told from her point of view. She's in high school senior, writing her thesis because it's not called a thesis; it's called a capstone project. And she's basically looking into what happened with this murder that happened 5 years ago. A young, popular girl was murdered, and the person who admitted to doing the murder, there was some questions whether or not he did it, was found dead he texted his dad to say that he'd done it. I'm not giving away the plot. This is all like in the first chapter. It is so excellent that it's one of those books I caught myself holding my breath while I was reading. As some of the plot twists in this. Like, I cannot say enough good things.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I like when we start drawing the connections between TV and books and movies and whatever, because the attention span things comes up too, right? Like, how long can we
Right.
digest a book for? And YA just makes me think that automatically, like binge series, binge this, binge that attitude. Did any other book from these 5 hit that mark too?
I really liked Big Bad, and I know everybody's going to roll their eyes when I say it's a Buffy thing, but it stayed in the Buffy universe with a lot of that same tone of that sarcastic wit that I like. So lowbrow humor. So sarcasm, and I love that feel from the original series. This takes place. Willow, you guys are rolling your eyes. I can feel it. Willow's had a baby, and this is the story told from her daughter's point of view. and sort of what's still happening in the area around Sunnydale. And again, I whipped through that book because I wanted to see what was happening on the next page. I found one of the other books I mentioned, It Ends With Us. It took me a long time to read it because I found it dragged for me.
Okay,
And
you
I found it
tried to
very
bring this
repetitive.
up before we started taping. Somebody cut
Yeah.
you off completely. Tell us everything.
I did not enjoy It Ends With Us. And it was on like everybody's like must-read list, like beach summer list. And I don't know if it's the violence against women that was in it. And I understand, like I always read epilogues and prologues of books because I want to understand what's going on in the writer's head. I understand why it was an important book for her to write for her. I understand why it's an important book for some women to read. It just didn't flow right with me or something.
Was
I
this your
can't.
first Colleen book, Colleen Hoover?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Is that my problem? I should try other ones. Like,
I'm just curious now if you would get into any of her other books at all, because they all have very similar approaches to topics that can be kind of problematic.
You know, there are a lot of books that read like they're very important and are saying a very good message that needs to be said, but they're also at the same time not particularly enjoyable, which all comes down to your intentions on like what you want out of a read. Like sometimes you don't want to put yourself through that.
yeah, I don't mind a book with a message, and maybe I think you might be onto something, Jacob, because I didn't expect it to be a book with a message. I looked at it like everybody's like, this is like a beach read. I wouldn't read this book and go, that's something I want to read on a beach. I'm also like, I would never read 50 Shades of Grey. I did not enjoy the Twilight series, although I did read every single book because I kept hoping it would get better because so many people love that series. And I don't know if it's I don't want to say the manipulation of women or that sort of thing. I've tended to be more drawn to books that have strong women characters. And yes, It Ends With Us. A lot of people have read it.
It's difficult.
Ends up that. But, I'd rather have a strong. My cat's going to walk across my keyboard and shut us off in a second. Sorry if you hear the cat rubbing against me. The female character is a weak person.
Yep.
Always rubs me the wrong way, and I don't know whether that's just me.
Well, it's challenging.
It is, but Gone Girl, I loved.
Yeah. No, but that was like a fiercely different book, I think. But at least in the way that the approach was.
Did you like it? Like we didn't. I didn't get your answer earlier because I was cut off.
It Ends With Us felt very uncomfortable to read. And Colleen Hoover, like I said, there were several books I read by her. Verity was another one. Where I felt very uncomfortable through the whole thing. It's also just meant to be emotionally straining, I think. Like there's no parts of Colleen Hoover's writing where I think, oh, I'm a bit relaxed now, or I can finally, chill for a bit. Like she makes it emotionally draining. If you guys have watched,
You? Are you going to say You?
No, what's that show where you just cry every episode? Hold up.
Grey's Anatomy?
So true, Karen.
Thank you.
But the one with Mandy Moore and
Oh, This Is Us.
This Is Us.
Oh.
Where like you're meant to just bawl your eyes out all the time or just be sad. Like the intention behind it is misery. Like it's very, very deep stuff, but also it means that you can't have an enjoyable or a relaxed time. You're signing up for sadness.
And I think maybe you guys have hit on something. I maybe wasn't in the right mood for it. I might give her another try. If I would not walk away from any of her books because of this.
Right.
Because I love to read. Like I will read anything.
Well, Ramya, in your case, for It Ends With Us, how did you approach that book? Like, did you know what you were getting yourself into?
Yes, because I had read, I think, at least 2 books by Colleen Hoover. I knew that I had to be in this mindset to pick up any book by her. And
do you think that helped in your, quote unquote, enjoyment or at least appreciation of it?
Yeah, the appreciation of the book, or to be able to say, this is what I'm signing up for, made a huge difference, Karen. Now, I think for you, you've also touched on something else, which is just the portrayal of the female characters, right? Or the main female characters in this book. And her being, abused or having to sit with that or having to sit with the I guess not sacrifices necessarily, but like the trap, feeling trapped, being trapped. That's very uncomfortable for people.
And it's a very real emotion, and I
Yes, it
don't
is.
want to undercut women
Mm.
who go through that, because that's something that happens. And I don't want to. I'm not trying to turn my head or what's the word I'm looking for, or deny sort of that existence. I just wish there was a way to tell that story without it feeling so.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. You have to feel horrible for the main character whose name totally escapes my
Mm-hmm. I have no idea.
my brain right now. But and maybe it's because like I wouldn't put up with that crap for 5 seconds. It's like,
Yeah.
see ya.
Yeah.
You
Exactly.
just can't
And
relate at all.
it frustrates me. It
Mm.
frustrates me. I want to shake her, which is abusive as well. I want to take her and say, like, you don't deserve this. You are
Right.
better than this.
Right.
And just get out.
Yeah.
And I think that, we've talked about my favorite book, which is problematic, which is Gone with the Wind. I love that book. And I've had to ask myself over these last few years, why did I love
Viciously
that book?
independent woman.
That's it, is that
Yes.
she didn't give two craps about what anybody thought about her. Like, she was
Mhm.
running a business at a time when she shouldn't. She was like doing tons of things she wasn't supposed to be doing, and she didn't care. And that's what I liked about that book. And I wish we could take out all the racism that's in it now and still have that character. But you can't. And I realized, like, in thinking about it, I've always been drawn, like Nancy Drew. Love those books. She just read it when I was way too young to be reading it. I was the girl lying on her floor with the nightlight, trying to read at like 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock at
With
night.
your
My
legs
parents always
kicked up in the air.
Yeah, absolutely. And my parents coming in and going, "You're going to need glasses someday." They were right. But it's straining my eyes every night because I just couldn't put books down.
Yeah.
I had that experience with The Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I couldn't put it down. I kept saying, only one more page, and just, especially the last half, fantastic. And it's a series. So I'm very excited. I've already got the other two on hold, two more of them on hold in my library queue.
I'd like to back up a little bit on something you mentioned earlier, that a couple of the books in the list you provided us were or are in the process of being turned into TV shows on Netflix or
Yeah.
wherever. I find just generally there seems to be a trend in book writing that books are coming off more and more like bona fide scripts. Like, the way books are structured nowadays seem to be much more adjacent to how TV shows are written, in the sense that like chapters are much more self-contained. There's a lot more cliffhangers that would work well for like episode endings and stuff like that. Have you guys noticed that?
It's really funny you say this, because when I was reading Good Girl's Guide to Murder, I actually stopped reading it for a few seconds to look up I'm thinking, this is going to make a great TV. I thought movie, but they're actually putting it into a series, going like, yeah, I can see 100% what you said.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have too many things to compare it to, like books turned to TV shows or movies and vice versa, because I tend to go with one medium or have had the experience with one medium and then just check out.
You're not too
Really?
interested to see how they convert it into a TV show.
Really?
I
check
love
out.
that aspect. That's one of my
I
favorite
Yeah.
things.
I'm
I am
way too caught up.
Yeah.
I am
every
so
single
worried.
book that I read that I find out is turned into a TV show,
You
I
check out the
immediately
TV
want to
show?
go see it. I'm so excited
Oh,
to
I'm
see
literally having the opposite reaction. I say this is going to be disappointing. This is going to be not done well. I don't know if it makes a difference just because we put a big name behind the director position or the writer position or whatever. Sometimes it makes a difference to me that the author of the book was involved in the process of the TV side, but most often I get turned off and I don't.
It feels like
Are-
more often than not, the book readers are very unhappy with the adaptation. Like, I'm a big fan of fantasy. The Witcher got turned into a TV show. Garbage.
not.
The Wheel of Time got turned into a TV show. Garbage.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones got turned into a TV show, but that was obviously incredibly successful.
But
and
here's the
people are
thing.
generally happy with it.
they're spending millions of dollars on Game of Thrones. Like, nobody can touch that budget.
And not just that,
If you
there's like
put-
the great drama of like whether he's going to continue the series or not. You know what I mean? Because it
I'm
started
still
halfway.
waiting for that
Yeah,
last
that was
book.
Yes.
so funny.
But something people said about A Song of Ice and Fire, which is the name of the Game of Thrones series, is that it is written like a TV show.
Yes.
Because George R. R. Martin was a screenwriter
Yeah.
before he started writing.
You could almost even argue that there's so much in the book that easily could be left out for a successful TV show. You know what I mean? So
They did. They
Yeah,
left,
they left
so
out a lot
much.
of stuff.
They had to.
So much
But
stuff.
so if you didn't read the books, it's not like you're thinking there's something missing or there's something going on that's weird. Whereas like with the Harry Potter series, I'm watching the movies and I'm going, this is like non-contextual. Like there were so many things that I felt were just ripped out of making the context feel good. Like the actual thing feel full.
How often did you read the books before you watched the movies?
A lot.
A lot.
That's the
So
problem.
you really were immersed in those
Yeah,
books
yeah,
before
yeah,
you got
yeah,
them.
yeah.
I
I
thought
couldn't
the
handle it.
Harry Potter films were fantastic adaptations.
Most people agree with you.
Mm.
Whereas I was like, I can't even sit through an entire movie.
Because if you
Wow.
extract the book from the context, they do, like, the movie itself is very self-contained and it doesn't rely on information that's in the book that's not
Yes,
provided in the movie.
fair.
That's the biggest problem
And
some
that
books
we
have.
need that kind of mindset to actually create a successful movie adaptation, right? To say like you shouldn't have to rely on anything from the books to get the movies to feel, properly done.
Yeah, it needs to be able to
But-
stand on its own.
Yes.
That's the problem with every Stephen King movie. I love Stephen King. I will read
Yeah.
his books nonstop, but
Yeah.
there's so much that happens internally in the
Exactly.
characters that does not translate onto the screen
Exactly.
at all.
It's not just situational, it's not just external. Like there's a thought process, right? Which is, that whole deep conversation about literary versus TV movies. But going back to Game of Thrones, because I watched the shows first, I couldn't even read the books. Felt the books were
Really?
long and tedious and so many characters and kept falling asleep. It just felt very long-winded. Whereas, those spaces were filled with silence and interesting kind of scene choices or music choices, like physical choices in the TV series. which
Do
I
you
was very
prefer to
happy with.
read the book first or watch
Yeah.
the movie TV series first?
No, books first. But if I didn't get
Me
to the
too.
books and only got to the TV series, like with The Witcher, I could have a proper review of it most likely.
Yeah, book first any day.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there's so much more color. I hate to say it, there's so much more
Yes.
color in the books. There's so
It's
much more that
depth.
you're. Yeah, I words are more powerful, I think, as we sit and talk, on paper than they are on screen.
Why is that,
If
do you
that makes
think?
sense, because your brain creates the world for
Exactly.
you.
100%.
You're not being spoon fed it by somebody else, and your
Mhm.
brain will always do things 100% more creative.
Which
than
is
watching it on
why it's
yeah.
difficult to then go watch a movie because you've already created the Harry Potter world as it is written in the book. And now you're seeing someone else's interpretation of the Harry Potter world.
Well, you can argue that when you listen to an audiobook, that's the same thing is happening
100%.
there as opposed to
Yep.
reading it in print because they're giving these characters
It is.
voices and tonalities that you might not have
Hermione
expected.
and Ron are always Jim Dale's versions of them for me. And so whoever you cast in the movies, they just aren't those characters for me. It's his
That's really
character.
interesting.
Yeah.
See, that's another transition we need to talk about is
Mm.
audiobook to movie instead
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
print to movie.
Wow, it's deep.
Interesting. Wow, you guys have my mind's going 100 miles at once here.
Karen, I have a question for you regarding your reading habits.
Okay.
Okay. There are 4 elements in books that I think really make a difference on your enjoyment of it. Rank these 4 elements: plot, setting, character, and writing. In order of importance to you when it comes to enjoyment of a book.
Plot, setting, character.
Setting's going to be last because a good story can be. I mean, how many times have Shakespeare's stories been retold in different settings? So setting's going to be last.
Mm.
I am tied to. Oh, this is a hard one. I'm going to say character first, writing and plot. Because to me, writing, that's hard. Character, writing, and plot. Then
Plot
setting.
last.
No, setting's last.
Oh, settings last. Right.
Mm.
Because a good character can cover up for weak writing. But they're all kind of tied in, like plot and that's not a fair question. I don't know.
I don't know. For me, writing number 100%.
I will come back to characters. I will put up with bad writing if the characters I love are in it. And I will use Buffy as an example. I will read any of the books that have been written by people about the Buffy universe.
I agree with
And
that.
some of them are not good.
Mm-hmm. Good writing is not that important if all the other elements are good. But that's just me. Ramya, what do you think?
Oh, struggling, guys. Because I've actually read through books that I've loved, like really, really loved. We're going to talk about Adi LaRue very soon, but this is one of these where just the writing kept me going and going and going. I didn't even realize there was no plot, you know? I mean, like, I mean, there's a plot, but you
Yeah,
know,
that was an issue I had with that book myself.
Well, I recommended it to Jacob, and I was like, "Oh, I love it. This is one of my favorite books. Don't even candidly review this after, please, because you're hurting. You're gonna hurt me." And then he's like, "The plot was not really there." And I thought back at it, and I'm like, "Yeah, it's true. It was just like a meandering kind of thing, but the writing was so poetic, and I enjoyed it. Like it just kept me going. It was like a good story."
Okay, so taking that, I'm going to ask you to Lord of the Rings, good books or not?
Good books, this might be a hot take, but I find them somewhat dated in their writing style.
Yeah.
It feels like you're reading the Bible. Like it feels old. It's just not very
that old.
contemporary.
It is.
It was from the 20th century, like he wrote them in the 1900s.
Like imagine
It's
reading
not-
fantasy now with today's language.
Yeah, it's
That's true.
completely different.
It
When you read it
feels
compared to like the fantasy landscape
Shakespeare.
now,
That's
it's
true.
completely different.
Yeah.
I found them meandering, which I can always argue. I didn't hate them. I wouldn't go back and reread them. I know there's people who will
Exactly.
reread them once a year.
So
Yeah,
this is
I'm glad I read them.
when you read books as adults that are meant to be classics or, just known literature that everybody should read or whatever, right? That's a problem that I've had where I wish I could get into it. Lord of the Flies. I still haven't completed reading this book. I've said this before and had reactions.
I love that book.
I know, and everybody
Really?
says that, but you guys read it as kids or as preteens or as part of a school thing. I have
School.
to, as a 30-year-old, pick up Lord of the Flies and try to get through it. I know what happens, but can I appreciate the book now as it was intended when it either first came out or when it was read at a certain stage of your life?
Well, the context is different, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because you can interpret it differently than when you read it at like 15, when you read it in high school or something like
But
that,
it's
or
almost
when
like
you read it
know
at 30.
what you're expecting.
It's
now,
very
so
different.
Is it
Yeah.
gonna sit with you the same way?
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting because when you're a kid and you read it like that, that's amazing. Being on an island by like the first, like that's incredible. I want to do
Yeah.
that. And then as the story
And also, you
progresses,
haven't
you're
heard
like,
about it, for
Yeah.
30 years. Like through everyone's reflections and recollections and referencing to pop culture and all of this stuff. Right? It's very
don't know.
different.
I don't know anybody who does rereads of Lord of the Flies though. Now that you mention it,
No. Because you already,
Because it is dated.
It's
But
dated,
just
yeah.
because something is dated doesn't mean we don't read it. It's just now we read it for academic purposes. Which I
Exactly.
think is why we often read them in English classes.
Yeah.
Books like The Great Gatsby and other older books like
I don't know.
I'm waiting
Oh,
to see what you
name me
call
another
other
old
older
book.
books, Jacob.
Right,
My arms are crossed. Go ahead. Throw out some older books,
already
Jacob.
made
Great
mad about
Gatsby. That
this.
was like the 1920s. I consider
Yeah,
that
it is.
old.
It is
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is old.
Yeah.
Catcher
I
in
would
the
accept that.
Rye.
Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, I still love Gone with the Wind. That was written in
Moby
like
Dick.
That was a really
1937.
good book, though.
Moby Dick or Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
I very
I
much enjoyed
reread
reading
that
this
every couple years.
book. Yeah, same.
Yeah. And then I
Why?
feel bad about
because
myself.
of the
yeah.
journey of the woman. Same thing.
Yeah.
Scarlett's journey is just so fascinating. And what you said earlier, Karen, about like she just didn't give a beep about whatever when during a time frame where women had to absolutely, like, it was part of their entire identity to care about what society thinks of them.
Yeah, and
Like, there was a
women
rule
had
book.
certain women had certain roles to fulfill, and you
Mhm.
weren't supposed to go outside of those.
Yeah.
And like she saved her family.
Yeah, there was zero individualism, zero. And so for a woman to be as wildly unconventional as she was, or rebellious as Scarlett was during that time, is just stark contrast.
But then the problematic stuff
Yeah,
just,
I know.
ugh,
I know.
it bothers me so much.
The good comes with the bad, and that's something we want to discuss at a later date on this show, is books that leave you with strong mixed feelings, where they're amazing in one aspect, but very lacking in another.
Yeah.
And those
I've
books
got lists.
Yeah. Those books can leave you feeling even more strongly about it than books you feel like 100% positive about.
Yeah.
'Cause
Talk to
it's
me
like-
about Twilight.
The lacked potential,
Oh,
right?
don't talk to us about Twilight.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Somebody who maybe agrees with me.
Awful
Ugh.
series. Can I
Like,
just say,
don't.
it's not a hot
don't.
take, is it, to say that Twilight sucks?
Yes, it's a really hot take. You got to be careful where you say
Are you
that.
serious?
Yes, because
Who
there
actually
are so
says
many.
it's good though?
Exactly.
I've never
See?
heard of anyone
Thank you. 3 out of 4.
appreciating
Jacob?
the book.
Peop-
Never read
people
it.
who
Oh.
will romanticize chasing a guy.
Yeah.
And
I
I could
think it
go on
was
for days.
Stephen
What's our
King.
time limit?
I think it was Stephen King that had a quote where he said Harry Potter is a story about friendship and how important it is to have friends, and Twilight is about how important it is to have a boyfriend.
Oh, and that is why he is my favorite person ever. Stephen King, you go, man.
I'm paraphrasing, but yeah.
Yeah, but
We got to get the proper quote because that's good.
he is such a good follow on Twitter. He is
Is
amazing.
he?
I
Oh, everything he
I
says
will
is
if that
gems.
man wrote a grocery list on a napkin, I
Yes.
would read it.
Yeah, he's not afraid to talk crap about any other
Oh,
author.
no.
He's a savage.
No,
No, seriously.
And
Have you
he-
guys
and
read
he-
On Writing? Like his guide to better writing?
No.
It is epic.
No.
You must. It was a Greg David recommendation. Shout out to another
Really?
colleague here. Yes.
love him.
So good. Very digestible. Absolutely hilarious. Like you're not
I
just
thought it'd be
learning
more
how
like
to
a
read.
textbook. I thought it was more
No.
like a textbook.
No, it is totally not a textbook. I promise you.
I will
Just go
add that-
in.
I will add that to the stack of books on my bedside
Yeah.
table, which is like 3 feet tall right now.
But it's Stephen King, man. Priorities. He's so good.
Yeah.
Anyways,
yeah.
now that we're done fangirling.
Karen, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure. I'm going to leave you with one thing. I saw a meme the other day that I thought was appropriate for this. Tour guide giving a tour of the town where Shakespeare was born and was standing outside of Shakespeare, where Shakespeare probably went to school, and said, "This is where Shakespeare went to school. It was probably a lot easier for Shakespeare because he didn't have to study Shakespeare."
I love that.
Yeah.
I loved it too. And I love that I have a place to use it.
I know. I love that you thought of that and said, we're bringing it here. Amazing. You're the best. Thanks, Karen.
Always a pleasure, guys. Anytime when you guys have that discussion about books that are problematic, bring me on.
Cheers.
Mm.
That was Karen Magee, Content Development Specialist at AMI. Stick with us after the break where we'll be discussing with another avid reader, Jennie Bovard of the Love Your Moments podcast. We'll be right back. You're listening to the AMI Audiobook Review. Welcome back to the AMI Audiobook Review. I'm Jacob Shamansky, and with me is Ramya Amuthan and our second avid reader of the episode, Jennie Bovard of the Low Vision Moments podcast, which I had the pleasure to be the technical producer for quite a while. I don't even know if you remember that, Jennie.
Of course I remember that.
We never spoke to each other. You just tossed me files and I did what I do.
Oh, I guess he doesn't need to talk to leave an impression, though.
Jacob, you were one of the magicians behind the scenes and very much appreciated.
Of course. No, we've, for this episode, we've opened up the floor for just simple conversations on what have you been reading. And we've talked to Karen Magee before the break. But there's no need to turn ourselves into knots and come up with some sort of galaxy brain question. Jennie, what have you been reading?
This is a good question because my reading taste is all over the place. Currently, though, I am reading I Heard You Paint Houses. Have you heard of the movie The Irishman?
Yes, yeah.
Starring Mr. De Niro. This is the book that inspired the film. And in my experience, the book is always better than the film. I have yet to come across a scenario where the film is better than the book, although there are some books I need to read to compare to the film. Anyway, I digress. I'm currently reading I Heard You Paint Houses. It's by, what is the author's name? Charles Brandt. So it's all about Frank the Irishman and his experience with sort of inadvertently involving himself in the world of organized crime during the days of Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters. And it is it's incredible in the way that it is both historical, which I love. It's based in fact, and it's got all that, all of that organized crime sensationalism. It certainly doesn't glorify organized crime in any way. I should put that out there. But it is just like having a really good conversation with the man himself, Frank the Irishman. And obviously, it's an unusual thing for a person of Irish descent to have been welcomed into such an organization. So It's a really interesting read. I put it down for a bit because it is one of these books where you really need to be paying attention. And I'm the type of person where I tend to multitask when I'm reading my audiobooks. So I don't know, a good chunk of chunk of the way through. I've got a couple chapters under my belt.
Now, you say that it's a conversation with the main character, the Irishman. What do you mean by that? Is it literally like a dialogue?
It's essentially, the book is, it's difficult to describe because it's kind of formatted in a way that I've not really experienced many times in a book before. So the book is essentially documented conversations with this man, Frank the Irishman Sheeran. And it is very detailed, and you can tell that this is just a man rambling in his armchair near the end of his life. He is detailed and he is just, it's really immersive. It is him telling a story that he's like been dying to tell.
Is it a story that's told like retroactively? Like he talks about things he's done far in the past?
Yes. So Frank is near the end of his life when the author Charles comes to talk with him. And really the aim of the conversation, like many conversations that many other writers and I believe journalists have had with Frank leading up to this book, everyone's trying to get him to talk about what happened to Jimmy Hoffa. Because we all want to know what happened to Jimmy Hoffa. Even Hoffa's children don't know what happened to Jimmy Hoffa. One of his kids she got into law and through her career tried to unravel the mystery. But this conversation, the end goal, my understanding, was for the author to try and get him to talk, to try and give us the details on what happened to Jimmy Hoffa, because the thought is that Frank the Irishman was in some way involved with the demise, with the taking care of Jimmy Hoffa. I heard you paint. Well, let me tell you about the title. Do you know what I heard you paint houses means?
Mm-mm.
I probably should have started with that.
Sounds
I heard
like
you
some
paint
sort of
houses.
euphemism.
Right. Painting houses refers to taking care of someone, making them disappear. And then I learned something in this book as well. You're going to love this, guys. I'm getting real dark real quickly. The other piece that I learned was that, so in this type of organization, if you paint houses, you're someone who takes care of people. And if you also do your own carpentry, that means that you also take care of what happens to the person after they've been taken care of. I don't know how to say it lightly. They get rid of the body. They hide the body.
I would assume that those two went hand in hand, though, no? What's the other version? You take care of the person and then somebody else takes care of the person after.
Yeah, you get a cleaner.
You get a
I don't know. I
cleaner?
don't have these. I don't see these. This is lingo.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if anybody knows here, it's you, Jenny.
Right. Out of the three of us. I mean,
I think a lot of times, yes, because there's a hierarchy, right? There's often like a hierarchy in these kinds of organizations. So just because you do the damage doesn't necessarily mean you do the cleanup.
true.
Are you generally a big fan of this genre, like crime fiction?
Yes, I love a good organized crime book, and preferably nonfiction. I've read Black Mass, which is about Whitey Bulger. I love this genre, and especially if it's something that is sort of removed from the present. I'd like to read about things that happened in the past, because then it's easier for me to go about my day and not feel scared and worried that these things are still going on. Although certainly to an extent they are.
What did you mean then when you said your taste in books are all over the place? Like, what is it that you think that the stuff that you read is atypical or what?
I wouldn't call myself an avid reader. Thank you for introducing me as such, though.
Has to.
In the last
Part of the
7 years, yeah.
It's a
It's kind of
formality.
Yeah.
prerequisite to be on. Sorry, I flubbed my application a little bit.
We never usually ask. We just assume.
Now, I didn't realize that. I should have known, because people say my taste in other things is a little quirky or a little off the wall, a little different. But I think it was in one of our exchanges, Ramia, when you said something about my selections being a little quirky. And I was like, damn it, even this is quirky.
You thought this was the exception.
I thought I was normal in this realm, but I don't do a lot of fiction. It takes a lot for me. So I gravitate towards books that are going to teach me something. I want to learn something. But the other big thing I look for is I want to either like be made uncomfortable. I want to
Oh.
I want to be subjected to something. I want you to take me to an uncomfortable place or subject me to something that in real life it would be traumatic, but in a book it's exciting. And think I'm probably similar with movies and podcasts. So I like this sort of historical crime novel. I really like journals and memoirs of people who have like been through some stuff. Really enjoy that sort of genre as well. But when I do get into fiction, I like science fiction and fantasy and some self-helpy type books as well. There are a few of those mixed in there too.
So we talked about this book. I heard you paint houses, even though I was not. Well, I wanted to talk about another book. Is what I'm trying to say. One that you have read already. When did you read Brain on Fire?
I read Brain on Fire probably close to 7 years ago now. And I should preface this next thing by saying that I'm a bit of an ice queen. So I seek out these books that are, subjective and uncomfortable at times.
What is an ice queen?
Yeah.
So let me explain. It's a it's a name my sister lovingly has given me because I don't get emotional easily. I don't
Oh.
cry at movies. I don't cry at when someone's giving a heartfelt speech at a family event. I'm the least likely to be crying. I cry when I get frustrated or mad or upset with myself. So this book though, Brain on Fire, really like shook my existence. Like
Ooh.
I really felt for the author. Her name is Susanna Callahan, and the book chronicles her experience with a form of encephalitis. And it is just such a whirlwind of experiences that I can't even imagine myself being in, but it shook me because I think she's she's so adept at explaining her experiences and her writing style. She worked for the New York Post before she wrote this book, before she had this experience. And I think that that's very telling. Like it's a writer who had this wild life experience, this life-changing experience. And what better to do with that than to write a book about it? And she did good.
And what's the short version of the experience that she had?
Yeah.
Spoiler free, if possible.
I'm going to try my best to be spoiler free, but Susanna so she's a young woman in her early 20s, I believe, when this starts taking place. She's sort of, like living a great young person's life. She's got this great job with the New York Post that she loves. She's got a boyfriend, an apartment. She's loving life, living life. And all of a sudden, she starts having these really scary episodes, and she doesn't know what's happening to her. And not only are the people around her, like at work and at home, they're explaining how she's behaving when these episodes are happening, but I don't want to spoil anything, but she doesn't really understand what's happening to herself. So she's being told, hey, you came in here and behaved totally off the wall. You were like totally not yourself. Something is going on.
And she can't connect it.
That's right. And so she goes through this process of trying to get a diagnosis, trying to get help. The people in her life insist that she go and try to get help. And it's not that the healthcare professionals, they do want to help. She sees a number of healthcare professionals, but there's one hero in the form of a doctor that sort of makes all of the right connections and helps her out in the end. But the trials to get through that, like it is just, it's very, one thing for me that was difficult to read was that it would have been easy for her to fall through the cracks.
Yep.
It would have been easy for her to be misdiagnosed
Mm.
and wind up institutionalized or otherwise improperly medicated
Right,
and
like a
lived her
narrowly
right.
missed tragedy, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So this book has everything. It's got a hero in the form of a doctor, and it's got just these experiences with the medical system that
Mm.
I would never want to endure. But it was very eye-opening in that sense.
Speaking of eye opening, like imagine having to recall and gather information around this experience to then write about it in full form. Because you're saying the experience for her had a lot of holes, right? Like she had no idea what was going on. She could barely connect it back to herself
Right.
being this person that people are describing. So having to revisit all of that after knowing this is what is happening with you, that must have been a process.
Right. I can only imagine. There are so many things in my life that I do not wish to revisit.
Mm.
But the process of writing this book, one of the impressive things is as well, she had to go and interview and discuss
Yep.
all of these incidents with the people in her life.
Exactly.
So the research that would have gone into it, I can't imagine how trying that piece alone was.
The people in her life that she more than likely subjected to some really uncomfortable
Yes.
situations with her erratic behavior.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, this book reminds me of a TV show that used to be on TLC called Mystery Diagnosis, where every episode is just somebody that has some sort of 1 in a million condition. And it's basically their journey to finding a diagnosis for their condition. And they go through the medical system, and it's really uncomfortable.
Mm.
It sounds like this book is basically an episode of that show.
I think it is. I've seen that show. Love that
It's
show.
addicting, eh?
A little bit of a guilty pleasure, I
Yeah,
think. Thank you for
it's kind
bringing
of
it up
trash TV, let's
first.
be real.
Yeah. But you're right. It is just like that. And this was actually made into a movie as well. I haven't seen it. But I think 2016 a movie was made about this. Read the book first. It's
Yeah,
definitely worth
produced by
reading the book
Netflix.
first. That's right.
Jenny, you told me in a conversation we had, can't remember when, that you picked up running, which a lot of us know that you love to do, just in context through your podcast and such.
Because I never shut up about it, let's be honest.
You said it, not me.
Yeah, you said it.
But I'm curious, like that's a hobby, but it was a hobby that you picked up later, in my opinion. You know, you didn't pick it up as a kid. Do you read about it? Was there some part that books played into you picking up running or physical activity or any of this stuff?
Not really. No. What got me into running was, well, there were a lot of different things that contributed to it, but I was seeing a lot of people who were in their later years in life. I was seeing a lot of them being really active when I worked at a public pool in an admin type role. And I was seeing all these people in like their 80s and 90s coming in and swimming their hearts out. And I was thinking to myself, I need to get my act together. That was part of it. Another part was I wanted to be a good goalball player. And through Blind Sports Nova Scotia, we always do the annual fundraiser that is the Blue Nose Marathon. So once I did that, I was just hooked. The endorphins and all the good feelings that come when you cross the finish line.
Yep.
That's kind of what got me hooked. But books do inspire me to want to do outlandish things. I'm really into books about long distance hiking and books about like long distance traveling.
Oh,
And
that's so
so
specific.
I know it's okay. And I'm about to be really basic. Don't tease me. The book that started it all was Wild
Oh.
by Cheryl Strayed.
Mm.
It's been one of Oprah's favorites. I'm not usually big on the Oprah
You're
list.
usually shouting out Oprah? Okay.
No, I'm not usually big on the Oprah's reading list, but Wild by Cheryl Strayed also made into a movie later on. Book is way better. I keep saying that.
There's a
But
theme.
that's what started it for me. And then I just could, and then I got this wild idea that it makes me want to try these things. But I'm kind of like that in my life where I see someone doing something fun and I'm like, I got to give that a try.
Right.
Let me try that out.
And
So I
have
will
you?
probably, no.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you
like,
love trying things you've seen in books, but you're really into crime
Mhm.
fiction. I don't know. I'm just putting one and two together.
But I also really like things like Lord of the Rings and, A Song of Ice and Fire. So you take what you will from different things that you read. But I have read so many books about long distance hiking and like solo travel that I've got all these secret plans in my mind that I'm planning out for when I have lots of time on my hands.
You actually have, because we asked you for, recent reads recommendations, and a couple of the titles from your recent read list were self-development and that kind of thing. So, I mean, Nisreen and I in past episodes of AR have talked a lot about self-development books, and, kind of just like the open-mindedness towards it. But also, there's a little bit of like, wow, everything is self help or everything can be self help these days. And, or how much are we actually getting out of it
Right.
versus it's big on social media, taking this, what is it called? Atomic habits, right? That kind of thing. What makes you want to read a particular self development type book? Is it a recommendation or do you just go find it? Is it something that you try to work on and you're like, I need to find a book?
I don't normally seek them out
Hmm.
based on what's going on in my life, which is not a bad thing to keep in mind. Maybe I should do more of that. I come across books in many different ways. One that I read recently called Toxic Positivity: Keeping It Real in a World Obsessed with Being Happy. It's by Whitney Goodman. She started on social media, so you're absolutely right about that part. It is everywhere. I don't even know where I heard about this book. I might have seen it in I think I might have seen it on a list somewhere, like a top 10 type list.
Mm.
And I thought, this title speaks to me. Let's see what we've got. And this book, it was such a nice balance between really being realistic about our day-to-day lives and actually giving helpful tools to deal with what's labeled as toxic positivity. Things like good vibes only don't always fly. I don't want to hear it could be worse. And it talks
Ugh.
about right?
Yeah.
It talks about tangible ways
Gross.
of dealing with all this messaging that's always coming at us.
Yeah.
So it's got to be really practical for me. And the other thing that gets me reading these sort of self-development, personal development type books is in my day job, I'm a mentor for students, for children and youth who are blind or visually impaired.
Mm.
So sometimes if I see something that's about that leans a little more towards child development and education, sometimes I'll lean into those a little bit for work as
Of
well.
course, yeah.
That makes perfect sense. And as you were pointing out these phrases, hashtag whatever, that's what I was thinking, right? Like that trigger factor of, as people with disabilities hearing something like it could be worse. It's just awful.
It's not helpful. And that's what this book addresses, toxic positivity. I highly recommend it. It's a really good read.
So we have a pretty good idea what kind of genres you're into now. What kind of genres do you not like? What are those genres that you avoid at all costs?
Romance.
Ah,
I get enough
we can
of
get
it
into
in real
this.
life.
Amazing. With Karen Magee, we got into the romance. Or did we? Maybe that was an offline conversation. It's all blurring together now, Jay.
I don't think we got into that, Rams.
Okay. All right. Why not romance?
Well, I'm not judging, but I used to work at CELA. I loved talking books and hearing about different people's interests. And romance is all some people read. That's great. I am all about escapism. I am all about living vicariously, but I just can't. It's the same with movies. I don't like the fluffy romantic movies. I like real stuff. And I think that translates into books as well. Uh, but on the flip side, I really like that sci-fi and fantasy. So I don't know. I feel like I get enough romance in my real life. I'm just going
Aw.
to leave it at that.
Aw,
That's
lovely.
nice.
Shout out to my husband.
Also, you talked about multitasking and how you need to really put down the other stuff to read certain kinds of books. Are there any weird things you do while listening to audiobooks? What do you do, Jenny? Tell us.
Sounds like you got lots of weird stuff
Yeah.
going on over there.
This is the show to finally come out and tell
You have
us.
the platform. Go ahead.
I do everything while reading. I practice yoga. I lift weights. I might be cleaning the cat box. I might be walking my dog. Anything and everything. I will try to multitask.
Do you
I don't
ever
know if
pretend
any
like
of
you're
those are
listening to a
weird.
conversation around you, but you're actually popping in earphones and listening to an audiobook?
No.
Really?
No, but I'll
Oh.
tell you, I'm going to tell you a dirty little secret. I don't know how dirty it is, but it's a
Ooh.
little secret I haven't told.
Let's hear it.
When I did used to listen to audiobooks in church.
That's awesome.
Oh, no.
I used to go to Catholic church. I did the whole catechism thing. And when high school rolled around, I was like, I am over this. And I would pop in my earbuds.
Ooh, that's
I
worse
don't
than
even
some
know if
people
they were
watching games at
earbuds back
funerals, I
then.
think.
It was the Bible, right?
Definitely. Definitely. That's what I told them. I'm going to hell.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Oh my God, Jenny, this was so much fun. That was Jennie Bovard, the Ice Queen, host of the Love Jamomas podcast on AMI Audio.
That's it for this week's episode of AMI Audiobook Review. Next week, we have our monthly audiobook check-in with audiobook worm Amir Khan. I don't think he's going to argue about being an avid audiobook listener. We're reviewing The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab's, which I have now spread around like wildfire. Like, I've really just told everyone to read it.
I think your entire friends group read it. though.
Yeah, you're the latest and the last, so we're going to have to do a formal review on
Yeah, I
that.
have thoughts.
So do I. I'm your host, Ramya Amadin, with co-host Jacob Szymanski, technical producer Nisreen Abdel Majid. This is AMI Audiobook Review, and until next week, happy audiobook listening.